The phone call came on a Tuesday, I remember, because I was trying to figure out if the leftover chicken was still good for David's lunch the next day. David's my husband, good man, steady, predictable as sunrise, which, after 30 years together, is both a comfort and, if I'm being truly honest with myself, sometimes a quiet little sigh in the back of my throat. The caller ID showed Harrison Industries. That was Arthur Harrison, David's boss, a man I'd only met a handful of times at stiff company dinners, always impeccably dressed, with a reserved smile and eyes that seemed to see a bit more than you were showing. David always spoke of him with a kind of awed respect. Mr. Harrison, never Arthur, even when just talking to me. Hello, Eleanor Vance speaking. Eleanor, good afternoon. Arthur Harrison here. His voice was smoother than I remembered, less boardroom, more warm, like old leather, if that makes any sense. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Not at all, Mr. Harrison. Is everything all right? My mind immediately went to David. Had something happened at work? Everything's fine. Thank you for asking. Actually, I was calling with a somewhat unusual invitation. For you specifically. For me, I nearly dropped the chicken. Oh, I own a small cabin up near Whisperwind Lake. It's quiet, very peaceful. I find it's a good place to clear one's head. I was planning on heading up this weekend, Friday to Sunday, and it occurred to me that you might enjoy the fresh air. David has mentioned you're fond of nature and that you've been working hard on your garden this year. I was stunned into silence for a moment. Whisperwind Lake was beautiful. I'd seen pictures. But why me? And alone? That's very kind of you, Mr. Harrison. Is he invited too? There was a slight pause. David mentioned he has that big project deadline. He's pushing for all weekend. Said he'd likely be working straight through. I wouldn't want to distract him. This was more of a spur of the moment thought. A chance for a bit of quiet retreat. If you'd be interested, no pressure at all. Of course. My mind raced. David had indeed been buried in work, coming home late, stressed and tired. He wouldn't be good company, even if he could go. And me? A weekend away from the routine, from checking on the chicken's edibility, from the low hum of unspoken restlessness. It sounded like a dream, but it also felt complicated. The boss, the cabin, just me. It's very generous, Mr. Harrison. I began, choosing my words carefully. I do love that area. Could I think about it for a short while and call you back? Of course, Eleanor. Take your time. My assistant has my direct line if you misplace it. I'll be heading up around noon on Friday. When I hung up, my heart was doing a funny little tap dance. I told David about it that evening over reheated lasagna. He was surprised, to say the least. Harrison invited you to his cabin? He put his fork down. Just you. He said you were busy with the project. I said, watching his face. And he mentioned you told him I liked nature. David rubbed his chin. Well, yeah, I guess I did mention your roses a while back. Huh. Harrison's a bit of an enigma. Keeps to himself mostly, outside of work. But his cabin, it's supposed to be something special. Very remote. He's a good man. Eleanor. A bit formal, but decent. If you want to go, I can't get away. He trailed off, already thinking about his spreadsheets. I could tell. You wouldn't mind? He looked at me then. Really looked. Maybe he saw the weariness I usually try to hide, or the flicker of longing for something different. No, honey, I don't mind. Might do you good. Get some fresh air. Just, be careful, I guess. Not that Harrison is, well, you know. I did know. He meant Harrison was an older gentleman, probably in his late 60s, always proper, not the type to cause concern. and yet a little thrill, a tiny shiver of the unknown, ran through me. It wasn't about Mr. Harrison, not really. It was about doing something just for me, something unexpected. So I called him back the next morning and said yes. Friday came quickly. I packed a small bag, a couple of books I'd been meaning to read, comfortable jeans, a warm sweater, my hiking boots. David was already at work when I left, a hurried kiss, and have a good time, call me, thrown over his shoulder. The drive was about 3 hours, gradually leaving the city sprawl behind and climbing into rolling hills that were just beginning to hint at autumn. The air grew crisper, cleaner. Mr. Harrison's directions were precise, leading me off the main highway onto a smaller county road, then onto a gravel track I wouldn't have noticed if I wasn't looking for it. The final stretch was a narrow dirt lane winding through dense pine forest, the sunlight dappling through the canopy. I felt a world away already. The cabin wasn't what I'd call small. It was a beautifully crafted log structure, 2 stories, with a wide, welcoming porch and large windows overlooking a breathtaking view of a crystal clear lake nestled between wooded slopes. Smoke curled lazily from a stone chimney. It was rustic, but elegant, solid, and peaceful. As I parked my car, Mr. Harrison emerged from the front door. He was dressed in a plaid flannel shirt and well-worn jeans, a stark contrast to his usual city attire. He looked younger, somehow, more relaxed. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. Eleanor, welcome. I'm so glad you decided to come. His voice, out here, seemed to blend with the soft whisper of the wind through the pines. Did you have a good drive? It was lovely, Mr. Harrison, I said, stepping out of the car and stretching. Absolutely beautiful country. Please call me Arthur. We're a long way from the office. He gestured towards the cabin. Come in, let me get your bag. Let's get you settled. There was a comfortable ease about him that immediately put me at rest. The subtle tension I'd been carrying, the faint whisper of what ifs began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet curiosity and a sense of rightness. This was going to be an interesting weekend. The inside of the cabin was even more inviting than the outside. Polished wood floors were warmed by colorful woven rugs. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall of the living area with comfortable-looking armchairs and a sofa arranged before it. Bookshelves crammed with books lined another wall, interspersed with interesting-looking artifacts, a piece of driftwood, a collection of lake stones, a framed botanical print. It smelled of wood smoke, old books, and something faintly spicy like cinnamon. It was a home, not just a house. It felt like him, like the part of Arthur Harrison no one at Harrison Industries probably ever saw. This is wonderful, Arthur, I said, truly meaning it. My own home, while comfortable, felt cluttered with the debris of daily life, of 30 years of accumulation. This was curated, but in a deeply personal way. Thank you, Eleanor. I find it's my sanctuary. He showed me to a guest room upstairs. It was simple but charming, with a handmade quilt on the bed and a window that looked out directly onto the lake. The water was a deep, sapphire blue, reflecting the clear sky. The bathroom is just across the hall. Make yourself comfortable. I was about to put on some tea, or would you prefer coffee? Tea sounds lovely, I said, downstairs, as he moved around the kitchen, a surprisingly modern and well-equipped space within the rustic shell. I found myself relaxing in one of the armchairs by the fireplace. The journey, the newness of it all, had tired me more than I realized. The silence here wasn't empty. It was filled with the subtle sounds of nature, the distant call of a loon, the rustle of leaves, the gentle lapping of water against the shore. Arthur returned with a tray holding a teapot, two mugs, a small plate of cookies, and a little pitcher of milk. Earl Grey. I hope that's all right. Perfect. He poured the tea, his movements unhurried and graceful. We sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, just sipping our tea and looking out at the lake. It wasn't awkward. It was companionable. David tells me you're quite the gardener, he said eventually, his eyes kind. I smiled. I try. It's my therapy. I think, getting my hands in the dirt. I understand that. This place is mine, in that sense. He gestured vaguely around, building some of this with my own hands, tending to the woods. There's a satisfaction in it that spreadsheets can't quite offer. I laughed, a genuine laugh. I can imagine. The conversation flowed easily after that. We talked about books. He had an impressive collection, ranging from classic literature to modern thrillers, even some poetry. He asked about my favorites and listened, truly listened when I spoke about them. He told me about his late wife, briefly, with a quiet sadness but also a gentle fondness. He'd built this cabin with her many years ago. It was their shared dream. Hearing that added another layer to the peace I felt here. It felt like a place built on love. He didn't pry into my life with David, but he asked about my children, who were grown and gone, and about my own quiet hopes for the future, now that the house was emptier. It was strange, talking so openly with someone I barely knew, and yet it felt entirely natural. He had a way of asking questions that made you want to answer honestly, to explore your own thoughts. As the afternoon light began to soften, painting the lake in hues of gold and rose, he suggested a walk before dinner. There's a trail that goes around the cove. The light is particularly beautiful this time of day. We walked side by side, the path soft with pine needles underfoot. He pointed out different trees, the names of birds whose songs drifted through the air. He wasn't showing off his knowledge. He was sharing his love for this place. I found myself breathing more deeply than I had in years. The subtle tension I'd carried for so long, the tension of an unexamined life, perhaps was loosening its grip with every step. He asked me about my dreams when I was younger, before marriage, before children. It was a question no one had asked me in decades. I hesitated, then found myself telling him about wanting to be a painter, a longing I'd packed away so carefully it had almost been forgotten. He didn't offer platitudes or easy encouragement. He just nodded, his expression thoughtful, as if understanding the weight of those packed away dreams. Dinner was simple: grilled salmon, a salad from greens he grew in a small, protected patch behind the cabin, and crusty bread. We ate at a small table on the porch, the air growing cool as dusk settled. The stars began to emerge, incredibly bright and numerous, far from city lights. I haven't seen stars like this since I was a girl, I whispered, looking up in awe. They're always here, Arthur said softly. We just forget to look. And in that moment, sitting there in the cool night air, with the vastness of the universe spread above us, I felt a connection to this quiet, thoughtful man that was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't romantic. It was deeper than that. Somehow, a meeting of souls, perhaps in a place where pretenses fell away like autumn leaves. He saw me, Eleanor, not just David's wife or a middle-aged woman. He saw the girl who had dreamed of painting and the woman who still carried that spark within her. And the most unexpected thing was he made me see her again, too. The chicken back home, the unread emails, the hum of the familiar. It all seemed a million miles away. This felt like the realest thing. The night deepened, and a comfortable quiet settled between us again. We finished eating, the plates cleared, but neither of us made a move to go inside. The air was crisp now, and I pulled my sweater a little tighter. Arthur noticed. "Getting chilly?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. I could light the fire inside. Or, "I have a couple of old, warm blankets we could use out here if you prefer the stars a bit longer." "The stars, definitely," I said, not wanting the spell of the night to break. He rose and went inside, returning a few moments later with two thick, soft wool blankets. He handed one to me, and it felt wonderfully comforting. He draped the other over his own shoulders. We sat like that, two figures cocooned in warmth, gazing up at the diamond-dusted sky. It's funny, I found myself saying, the words emerging almost unbidden. For years, I've felt like I'm on a train, moving along a set track. Not a bad track, necessarily. Comfortable, familiar, but I haven't really looked out the window, truly looked in a very long time. Arthur was silent for a moment, letting my words hang in the cool air. Then he said, "Sometimes it takes a different vantage point to remember what the view can be." His words resonated deep within me. This weekend, this cabin, this unexpected companionship, it was that different vantage point. He wasn't trying to change my life or offer solutions to problems I hadn't even fully articulated to myself. He was simply present, and in his presence, I felt more myself than I had in years. He began to talk then, not about work or anything mundane, but about the constellations above us. He pointed out Orion, the Pleiades Cassiopeia, telling me the old stories associated with them. His voice was calm, mesmerizing, and I listened, utterly captivated. It wasn't a lecture, it was a sharing, as if he were unveiling secrets of the universe he'd personally been entrusted with. I realized that what I was feeling was a profound sense of being seen and heard, not judged, not evaluated, just accepted. With David, whom I loved, our conversations had fallen into familiar grooves, patterns worn smooth by time and shared history. There was a comfort in that, but also a lack of discovery. Here, with Arthur, everything felt new. He said, his gaze still on the stars. "My wife, Clara, she loved this. The quiet, the stars. She used to say this was where the world made sense." He paused. "I haven't talked about her this much with anyone in a long time. Thank you for sharing that with me," I said softly. "It helps me understand the peace of this place even more." A comfortable silence fell again, punctuated only by the distant hoot of an owl and the crackle of a log settling in the fireplace indoors, its warmth just barely reaching us. I felt a surprising wave of emotion well up, not sadness, but a kind of poignant gratitude for this moment, for this unexpected connection. It was as if a tightly wound spring inside me had finally begun to unwind. I must have drifted off for a moment, lulled by the stillness and the quiet murmur of the night, because I startled a little when Arthur spoke again, his voice gentle. "Eleanor, perhaps we should head in. It's getting quite late, and the mountain air can be deceptive." I nodded, a little sheepishly. "You're right. I think the stars and your stories have quite hypnotized me." We stood, and I folded the blanket, feeling a reluctance to end the evening. Inside, the living room was bathed in the warm glow of the dying fire. The books on the shelves seemed to whisper secrets in the dim light. "Thank you, Arthur," I said, turning to him at the foot of the stairs. "For everything. Today has been more than I expected." He met my gaze, his eyes holding a deep kindness. "The pleasure has been all mine. Eleanor, I'm glad you're here. Sleep well." Up in my room, under the handmade quilt, the scent of pine, and wood smoke faintly perfuming the air, I lay awake for a long time, not with a racing mind, but with a sense of quiet wonder. Nothing scandalous had happened, nothing that would make for a lurid headline. And yet, something profound had shifted within me. A door had opened to a part of myself I thought had been locked away for good. The woman who looked up at the stars and dreamed. The woman who felt a connection that was purely about shared humanity, mutual respect, and the quiet joy of being truly understood. And as I finally drifted to sleep, I knew this weekend was far from over, and that the most significant discoveries were perhaps yet to come in the light of a new day. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birdsong and the soft light of dawn filtering through the window. For a moment, I was disoriented. The unfamiliar room, the silence so different from the usual city hum. Then it all came back. The cabin, the lake, Arthur. A smile touched my lips. I felt lighter, rested in a way that went deeper than just sleep. I dressed quietly and crept downstairs, not wanting to disturb Arthur if he was still asleep. But the aroma of coffee and something baking, bacon, maybe, told me he was already up. I found him in the kitchen, indeed, frying bacon, and a pot of coffee was gurgling cheerfully on the counter. He was humming softly to himself, a tune I didn't recognize, but that sounded contented. "Good morning, Eleanor," he said, turning with a smile. "Sleep well." Like a log, I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Better than I have in ages. What can I do to help?" "Nothing at all. Just relax. Breakfast is almost ready. How do you like your eggs?" We ate breakfast on the porch again, the early morning mist still clinging to the surface of the lake, making it look ethereal and mysterious. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. We talked easily about everyday things this time: the stubbornness of the deer that kept eating his attempts at a vegetable garden, my own battles with aphids on my roses. It felt as domestic and comfortable as if we'd been sharing morning routines for years. After breakfast, he asked, "What would you like to do today, Eleanor? There are some lovely hiking trails, or we could take the canoe out on the lake. Or, if you prefer a quiet day, the porch and a good book are always an excellent option." The idea of gliding across that still, misty lake was incredibly appealing. "The canoe sounds wonderful," I said. He had an old, beautifully maintained cedar strip canoe stored in a small boathouse by the water's edge. Together, we carried it to the shore. Getting in was a little wobbly, and I laughed as I nearly tipped us both into the chilly water, but Arthur was patient and steady, guiding me. Once we were out on the water, a profound quiet enveloped us. The only sounds were the dip of our paddles, the gentle drip of water from the blades, and the distant cry of a waterfowl. The mist was burning off as the sun climbed higher, and the lake transformed into a mirror, reflecting the sky and the vibrant, tree-covered slopes. We didn't talk much as we paddled. There was no need. There was a communication happening on a different level, a shared appreciation for the beauty surrounding us, a comfortable synchronicity in the rhythm of our strokes. I found myself noticing the smallest details: the way the sunlight caught a spiderweb strung between reeds, the V-shape of a beaver swimming in the distance, the subtle variations in the shades of green on the mountainside. My senses felt alive, awakened. After a while, Arthur steered us towards a small, secluded inlet where a tiny waterfall cascaded down mossy rocks into the lake. We pulled the canoe half onto a gravelly patch of shore and just sat listening to the musical splash of the water. "This is my favorite spot," he said quietly. "Clara and I used to come here for picnics." I felt privileged that he shared these intimate memories, these sacred places with me. It wasn't about replacing anyone or intruding on the past. It felt more like being allowed to witness the enduring power of love and connection, and it made my own heart feel larger. He then turned to me, his expression thoughtful. You mentioned wanting to paint yesterday. Eleanor, do you ever still think about it? Or perhaps, do you ever just sketch for yourself? I felt a blush creep up my neck. It's been so long, decades. I wouldn't even know where to start. All my supplies dried up or got lost in moves years ago. He nodded slowly. Understandable. But the desire, does that ever resurface? I looked out at the waterfall, the play of light on the water, the textures of the moss and rock. Sometimes, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. When I see something particularly beautiful, like this, there's an urge, a feeling of wanting to capture it, not just in a photograph, but more. He didn't press, but a little later, as we paddled slowly back towards the main part of the lake, he said, I have some old sketching pads and charcoals in the cabin. Nothing fancy. Belonged to my daughter when she was a teenager. If the inclination strikes, you're more than welcome to use them. His offer was casual, gentle, but it landed in my heart with surprising weight. It felt like a permission slip, not from him, but from the universe, somehow. A nudge to explore that dormant part of myself. The rest of the day passed in a similar vein of quiet companionship and gentle discovery. We did a short hike in the afternoon up to a lookout point that offered a panoramic view of the entire lake and the surrounding mountains. He packed a thermos of tea and some of the cookies from the day before. We sat on a sun-warmed rock, and he told me about the history of the area, about the loggers and miners who had first come here, and the efforts to preserve its natural beauty. What struck me most was his deep respect for everything, for nature, for history, for the people in his life, even for the quiet aspirations of a woman he barely knew. There was no agenda, no expectation. It was simply an environment of mutual regard. That evening, after another simple, delicious dinner, as we sat by the fireplace, the night was cooler now, and the fire felt cozy. I found myself thinking about David, not with guilt or with a sense of comparison, but with a new clarity. Our life had become a set of routines. Yes, but there was love there, a deep, abiding history. Perhaps what had been missing wasn't a fault in him, or even in us, but in my own disengagement from my inner world. I had let my own colors fade, and in doing so, perhaps the world around me had seemed less vibrant too. Arthur was reading, a pair of glasses perched on his nose, looking utterly content. The only sounds were the crackling fire and the rustle of his turning pages. I didn't pick up a book myself. Instead, I just watched the flames dance, my mind surprisingly calm, yet active with new thoughts, new perspectives. The unexpected thing, I realized, wasn't just the invitation or the setting. It was the space that had been created. Space to breathe, space to think, space to simply be. And in that space, something was beginning to stir, a gentle unfurling of self. The you won't believe what happened wasn't a dramatic event, but an internal blossoming, quiet and profound. It was the rediscovery of Eleanor, and that, I was beginning to understand, was more astonishing than any external drama could ever be. The next morning, our last morning, dawned clear and bright. The lake was like glass, perfectly mirroring the sky. There was a touch of melancholy in the air for me, the knowledge that this interlude was coming to an end. I found Arthur on the porch, nursing a mug of coffee, looking out at the serene view. Morning, I said, joining him. He had another mug ready for me. Good morning, Eleanor. Our last one here for now. He smiled, but there was a similar reflective quality in his eyes. We didn't say much for a while, just sipped our coffee and absorbed the peace of the morning. The quiet between us was as comfortable as our conversations had been. Finally, I said, Arthur, I don't quite know how to thank you for this weekend. It's been transformative. It felt like a big word, but it was the only one that seemed to fit. He turned to me, his gaze direct and kind. Eleanor, the pleasure was truly mine. It's been a long time since I've had such engaging company. You brought a warmth to this old cabin that it hasn't felt in a while. His words touched me deeply. I found those sketching pads you mentioned. I said, a little shyly, last night, after you went to bed, I I drew the fireplace. Just a quick sketch. It wasn't very good, but a genuine smile lit up his face. But you did it. That's what matters, isn't it? The starting. Yes, I agreed, feeling a little thrill. It felt good, surprisingly good. He nodded. The creative spark, no matter how small, needs tending. Don't let it go out again, Eleanor. His words weren't a command, but an encouragement, gentle and profound. We packed up after a simple breakfast of toast and fruit. I helped him tidy the cabin, a comfortable domesticity settling between us as we moved around the familiar spaces. It felt strange to be leaving, like waking from a beautiful dream, yet knowing that the dream had left an indelible mark on my waking reality. When my small bag was back in my car and it was time to go, there was a moment of awkwardness, the kind that comes when something special and unlabeled is ending. How do you say goodbye to an experience that has quietly rearranged your inner landscape? Arthur walked me to my car. Drive safely, Eleanor, he said. The city will feel loud after this. I'm sure it will. I paused, then met his gaze. Thank you again, Arthur, for your generosity, for your company, for everything. Thank you, Eleanor, he replied, his eyes holding a warmth that I knew I wouldn't forget, for reminding an old man what good conversation and shared quiet can feel like. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then extended his hand. I took it, and his handshake was firm, warm, a gesture of pure respect and friendship. There was nothing more, nothing less, and it was perfect. The drive back was different from the drive there. The landscape was the same, but I was seeing it through new eyes. The colors seemed more vibrant, the air fresher. I felt a sense of calm, of quiet joy that I hadn't realized I'd been missing so profoundly. When I got home, the house felt both familiar and slightly alien. David was on the sofa, engrossed in a football game, a pile of work papers still spread on the coffee table. Hey, you're back, he said, his eyes flicking from the screen to me, and back again. How was it? Did you have a good time with Harrison? It was wonderful, David, I said, and my voice sounded different to my own ears, clearer, really peaceful. Arthur, he prefers Arthur, at the cabin, sends his regards. Oh, Arthur? Huh? He grinned, getting informal with the big boss. Good. Glad you had fun. And then he was back to the game. In the past, that might have bothered me, that slight lack of deeper inquiry. But now it didn't. I realized that the experience at the cabin was mine. It didn't need to be understood or validated by anyone else, not even David. It had happened within me. Over the following weeks, something had indeed shifted. I found myself noticing small beauties again. The way the afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen window, the intricate pattern of a leaf. I bought a simple sketchbook and a set of charcoal pencils. I started drawing, just for myself, A bowl of fruit, my sleeping cat, the view from my bedroom window. They weren't masterpieces, far from it, but the act of doing it, of engaging that forgotten part of myself, brought a quiet satisfaction, a sense of purpose that rippled out into other areas of my life. I found myself more patient with David, more engaged in our conversations because I was more engaged with myself. I suggested we take a weekend trip, just the two of us, to a little bed and breakfast by the coast. He'd mentioned wanting to visit years ago. He looked surprised, then pleased. I never told David the full extent of what happened at the cabin, not because it was a secret to be hidden, but because it was so personal, so internal. It was about the quiet conversations, the shared silences, the rediscovery of starlight, and the gentle encouragement from an unexpected friend to pick up a long lost piece of myself. What happened at Mr. Harrison's cabin wasn't a scandalous affair or a dramatic revelation that would upend my life. It was something far more subtle and, I think, far more profound. It was a reminder that connection can be found in the most unexpected places, that mutual respect can form a bridge between two very different people, and that personal growth doesn't always require a cataclysm. Sometimes all it takes is a quiet weekend, a kind soul, and the courage to look up at the stars and remember who you are and who you still might become. And that, I believe, is a story worth telling.